Hello everyone, welcome to Altengrad city in City Skylines. As you can see here, we did everything on this side of the river. This city part is all done. We built the modern offices and hotel and also built some partially finished housing on the edge of the city. But let's now focus on the opposite side of the river and on the project that was left unfinished for a super long time. I'm of course talking about the main train station. So that's exactly where we will return today and properly complete it, together with some high-density blocks around the center. Okay, let's jump right into it, and it's clear right from the start that we need to do the tracks. We need to provide more tracks into the station, or just inside the station itself, because I only did a bare minimum back in the day so I can have just live vehicles going into the area, but obviously the station is just tiny right now, so we need to expand it quite a lot. As you can see, I'm making great use of the new network multi-tool. I think this was the first episode where I had first project where I had the upgraded version of the network multi-tool, which already had some really interesting features that are just going to help me greatly with these kinds of projects. You can see here that I was just getting familiar with the workings of the network multi-tool for this particular case, for these kinds of switches and all these kinds of connections to the side tracks and stuff. So I was not exactly all that good with it, but I learned as the project progressed, and then I was just able to really do these kinds of switches and curves and everything super fast. And this entire project was definitely so much easier and built so much faster thanks to the multi-tool. And also it's actually more realistic as a nice bonus, because I'm now able to do these kinds of radii as they need to be. So I think I'm always trying to go at least like 150 meters so that all the rail vehicles will be able to just navigate through all these switches and curves, right? Even though for some curves I was doing even higher radii. It's not really necessary, but in some places it was okay. Now, this place also is going to be some kind of like a train or engine maintenance area. It's going to be partially like a train yard and even industrial area. It's going to have a couple of industrial buildings on the side. So it's just going to be a quite big area at the end. So from a very small train station that we had before, it's going to be actually quite a big one. I'm not really sure if the biggest one in the city. I think that maybe, yeah, it's actually going to be the biggest one, because the terminus station, both of them that we did, I don't really think that they had these kinds of train yards as part of them. So yeah, if this entire area is just going to be counted as one, it's definitely going to be the biggest. So, that makes sense. It's supposed to be a main train station anyway, even though it's definitely not going to be as big as it probably needs to be to, capacity-wise, I suppose, for the passenger or maybe even cargo trains. But that's kind of intentional, because it's just going to be an opportunity to do some kind of changes as we progress in time with the series. Anyway, what's exactly happening over here? So I just really quickly finished some of the connections to the passenger side of the station, and then I started doing these kinds of parallel tracks that are just going to form the train yard itself. It's not really going to be like a big train yard, but I'm mostly going to now focus on the industry. So there are these couple of buildings, these long buildings that I'm creating using the Victorian mill houses, not really houses, but just like warehouses, I suppose. And they have these loading platforms on the side, so that's ideal to create these kinds of load platforms or unloading platforms rather, for the cargo. So I'm providing just a couple of tracks really there. In this particular case, I'm also doing these tracks inside some of these buildings. So these might not only be warehouses, but actual factories, so that some things might be produced in here. But obviously the loading buildings might be used for like unloading the cargo that's later going to be transported into the rest of the city. So it's not just the industry, but it's like a cargo station itself. Okay. Now, we have to also do a very important thing, which I'm just going to really note in here in this area. but it's not really going to be built right now. And that's obviously supposed to be some kind of a coal loading and unloading place. Not only for just resupplying or refueling the engines, but also for some kind of an unloading area for coal, because obviously in the 1930s, most of the houses in the city, I'm not really sure if most of the houses, but probably, yeah, they were using coal heating. So especially in the winter, coal must have been transported into the homes, into the entire city, quite extensively. So usually there were, or at least, I did some research, took a look at some train stations. Obviously, coal was transported into cities by rail because it was just needed in very, very large quantities. And, the only way to provide that kind of volume was by a rail. So train stations also had the coal stations. I'm not really sure what they might have been called in English, but in Czech at least, they were called coal stations. And they were exactly that. Yeah, just unloading platforms for coal where it would be kind of sorted for later just selling them to the end customers, I suppose. Or maybe not really the end customers. I suppose that the train station itself had some kind of delivery company, delivery capabilities or something like that, and people were just ordering it so it would be delivered on trucks to their homes, where they would be just unloaded into cellars, usually where they would be just put into the burners. How are they even called? I don't even know. Anyway, that's what we need to do in this place. That's kind of what we already did in that old town terminus station, but it was kind of a small area, and to be perfectly fair, I was not exactly doing it with having that much knowledge about real life places like that. So for this one, I actually did some research for like old 1930s maps. I was taking a look at some of these train stations, how they looked like in there, and it's not exactly like a one-to-one copy, but it's close, I suppose. Anyway, that's gonna be a bit later. We are just now going to provide some kind of tracks over this main road, actually, because that's something that people wanted to see when I was doing this on the stream, and it's just like a nice detail. It's going to provide more opportunities to do just some detailing and just extend this industry into more places, because as you can see in that demand bar, the industry is actually in a very high demand because there is quite a big unemployment in the city. So providing larger industrial areas is always welcome. I'm also using for the new industrial place on the other side of the road that pier building, the new one from the workshop. It's obviously not really intended for these kinds of purposes, but it's actually working quite well. You can actually place it right on the surface, and if with Move It you're going to get rid of some of those roads that are going to be spawned with them, then you can easily just hide the actual pier that's on the side of this building. So that's absolutely perfect, and you can even use these for just generic warehouse buildings in your industrial areas for more variety, because that's obviously something that I really do need in the city, because otherwise I would be just recycling some of these industrial buildings over and over again, which is kind of what I'm doing anyway, because they are just looking so good. And it's industry. It doesn't really need to be all that super varied, I suppose, but at the end of the day, if you can afford to, or if you can be able to do some kind of more variety, then it's obviously welcome. So this place, this industrial area, it's going to have these kinds of buildings a bit more randomly oriented. I'm thinking that it definitely grew in the decades since it was built, the station. The station is probably not that old. The oldest station is the Old Town station. That's the terminus station that we did some time ago already. And this one was probably, even though the station itself might be actually quite old, but I'm thinking that this station was definitely expanded a lot, and it was just growing kind of naturally. So some of these buildings are looking much older than others, and in the 1930s it might also have received some kind of expansion with the tracks or some of those kinds of buildings around it. So we are now going to do that coal station area. Now, this entire station, it's not exactly on a flat terrain. Some of these roads, the station itself is kind of elevated above the surface levels in front of it. There are the plazas in front of it, the multi-level plaza in front of the station building. And this tram road is on the lowest level. It's going around the station. It's kind of looping around the station. And eventually it is going to come to the same level as the rails. But, before the station, it needs to, go under that bridge. So at the side of these roundhouses, there is actually a considerable difference in elevation. So that's why I did that retaining wall. By the way, I'm not really sure when I got that, but this retaining wall is perfect. This is actually probably the perfect brick texture that I needed for Altengrad. And I really don't remember the name of the creator right now, but it's absolutely amazing. And I was even using the node controller for that wall, because usually these kinds of network walls are kind of thin, which is fine for like fences and stuff. But this wall is actually kind of tall, so I really made it much beefier with the node controller. And it's just looking so good. The texture of the bricks is perfectly fitting with all of these other buildings. The tone of the color is just the best. It's much better than all the other walls that I got elsewhere in the city. Anyway, the coal station was built very quickly, as you could have seen. So basically, what I saw in the real life examples was just a single track for the trains that was going kind of curved into the station. And all around it were these kinds of bunkers, I think they're called in English, these kinds of base, like brick walls, I suppose, or stone walls, I'm not really sure, that are just dividing the individual places for the coal. I'm not really sure why that is, why the coal is just not dumped into like one big pile and then taken from it. Maybe it like belongs to different companies, maybe these different bunkers, or it's just for better sorting, so that they're just going to tell the drivers of the trucks that are eventually going to load the coal to just go to, I don't know, bunker 5A or something like that and take the coal from it. Maybe that's probably the case. So, I was just trying to copy that. This coal station that we're doing in Altengrad is so much smaller than the one I was taking inspiration from Prague. But, Altengrad generally is just like a smaller copy of, well, not really a copy, but it's just like a smaller scale city compared to the real life references that I'm taking inspiration from. Not just Prague, but all the rest of the cities that I mentioned throughout the series, okay? So yeah, that was the coal harbor. I was also putting some of those cards in there. I'm not really sure if those cards would be used for the coal, but I was also given the information that these kinds of stations had a lot of these cards for ash from the locomotives to just dump it into them and put it somewhere. I'm not really sure where, but it felt just like a nice detail. So obviously I'm not really, you can probably tell that I'm not exactly all that super knowledgeable about these kinds of places, but I'm just really trying in Altengrad to create these kinds of details so that they might resemble realistic situations, but there's obviously some kind of how do you call it in English? Artistic freedom or something like that. I'm not really trying to call this art, but you probably understand what I'm trying to say. I just need to upgrade these kinds of, or not upgrade, but adapt these kinds of things so I can actually build a city, based on these real life places and references. All right. Anyway, that's the station roughly done. We are going to see it some more because I haven't done, for example, the coal place or the place where the coal is going to be loaded into the locomotives. That's going to be done later. But right now, I really wanted, because I was kind of struggling with maybe finishing the station. I was not really exactly sure how big it's supposed to be, so I really kind of wanted to take a break from it and do some block filling. So we are now on the side of that big park, again, like a very old project in the city. And there were some buildings, here and there, some kind of blocks half finished or something like that. Yeah, you can see the layout, what I did with the streets and kind of upgraded it right now. And we just need to finish it. We just need to fill all of these blocks. At first, I was thinking that this place is going to be reserved for the football field or some kind of a football stadium. I don't really want to use the stadium in this time period because it's not really going to be that big anyway. But I eventually decided to put it somewhere else. It's actually going to be part of the next episode, okay? So I eventually did build it, in the city, don't worry. But this area is just going to be filled with these high density blocks. So as you can see, even in the time lapse, I'm not exactly paying that much attention to it, not really focusing on it that much. I'm only trying to just give you these overall shots of the area to just, let you see the progress that I was doing. And it was a very, very straightforward thing to do, because at the end of the day, this is going to be, like I mentioned a million times before in the series, these kinds of blocks are all about the quantity of these buildings. So that's exactly what I was trying to go for. But of course, someday you're gonna have to start doing these blocks lower and lower density, because you're gonna be just building them, towards the edges of the city, or not exactly to the city, but towards the edges of the high density places, which is exactly gonna be this case. Now, a long time ago also, I did this train junction in here, which is basically just this triangle, which is built using these viaducts in here. And I wanted to create some sort of a valley in there, mostly just to really justify using the viaducts that I got back in the day newly. But it's just creating something interesting, right? I'm probably later going to add some more, well, not probably, I already did that in today's project, but I'm just going to add some kind of warehouses, like very, very light industry, and a couple of workers housing or something like that, because that's probably something that you would find on edges of, not exactly the city at this point, but on the edges of these high density areas, right? It obviously needs to start going lower and lower density. That's kind of clear how that needs to be. Also, this project, what I'm doing right here, well, not a kind of a mini project, let's call it. This is the tram road that's going from that big park, and there was this just road that was kind of on much lower level. It was ending there, it was a dead-end road, but since I was also doing these kinds of buildings on the other side, on lower elevation, I decided to just put a tunnel in here, like an overpass for the main road, or underpass for the side road, however you want to look at it. So that's just an interesting project. It's kind of on the side of this high density expansion, but it's just, something interesting. It's just not like an ordinary intersection, but it's just a tunnel, why not? It's a great opportunity to do some kind of, different levels, multi-level detailing and stuff, which is kind of scarce in Altengrad. So, every chance I get, I kind of want to do these kinds of things. And actually using these props as procedural objects, these arches, to create that bridge. Maybe this bridge might actually be, now that I think of it, oh yeah, I didn't plan it, by the way, okay? It's just something that occurred to me right now when I'm doing the commentary, but maybe this bridge is actually the moat for the old city walls. Yeah. That might actually be it, because I'm kind of using, again, not planned at all, but for this arch structure, I am using the very, very old, maybe even medieval bridge prop. It's not really part of the medieval walls, but, those modern walls. But yeah, the walls were going through this area, so this might have actually been the place where they used to be, and maybe the bridge remained. So that's a very good point that I just kind of rediscovered when looking at the time lapse after building it. So that's kind of nice, this kind of accidental discovery of possible causes of these places. Anyway, again, taking some inspiration from real life, doing these kinds of lines of buildings on the side of the railway. It's probably not going to be the best address, but I suppose that back in the day, people didn't really care that much. Also, the traffic on the railway probably wasn't that heavy. Today, I really wouldn't want to live right next to the railways, even though today people are kind of taking care of like the noise pollution a bit more, sound barriers are a thing. So maybe the buildings are actually going to be fine going forward, but it just felt like a nice change, really, to not just do a block of buildings, but just a line of some of these like early 20th century apartment buildings or houses right on the side of those very high density blocks, before that. Now, we also need to do something about this plaza, this upper plaza, or not really a plaza, like an entrance road to the station building, because I made it look really, really fancy back in the day. And I was not exactly sure what I was thinking, because it was never aiming anywhere. It was kind of a road that was just going sideways of all these different projects. So I had to finish it somehow. It's kind of a wide road. It's made using two parallel rows. There are these planters in between. It's supposed to be like the main entrance to the station, and also a road that's going to service that line of buildings, that block of buildings. But it's working, by the way. It's working. People are nicely using the sidewalks. I banned some crosswalks so they can't go into that median area, let's call it. So that's kind of nice, but it's not exactly continuing anywhere. So I had to just wrap it up with that simple intersection. And maybe the real life lore for this area might be that there was some kind of a plan for like a bigger, like a boulevard around the train station, but it was never finished. And it just left the road looking like this, because that's also kind of realistic. You had all kinds of projects in the late 19th century or early 20th centuries that were just not really completed, never fully done. Okay. So, again, some kind of unintentional things that are happening in here because I was just building these things so long time ago, and I wasn't really planning them ahead, or I might have actually forget how I planned them because it was just such a long time ago. Anyway, we are now going to return back to the train station or the rail yard, kind of, and we're going to do some kind of detailing. So I'm borrowing some of these ideas from, for example, the big industrial zone, where I also did these kinds of like low bushes or trees, and also this kind of rough-looking grass between the rails, because it's just going to be something in there. It's just not going to be like the uniform green grass color absolutely everywhere. Now, I'm also using the decals very, very heavily everywhere around the tracks. Obviously, I was using the decals super heavily on that coal station so that the ground is going to be absolutely black from all the coal dust and everything, the coal itself. And the rest of the station, I'm also trying to make it a bit dirtier, which is something I haven't done in the rest of the stations, which was probably a bit mistake. Now that I look at the old projects, they are looking a bit too clean. So I definitely wanted to make it much dirtier for this one, which is going to add for the realism. Now, by the way, I still didn't really decide, or I haven't decided yet at this time point when I was building this, how big the entire industrial area is going to be. So it's actually not going to be finished completely. I'm going to take a look at it in the next episode a bit as well, because I really wanted to extend it a bit more, but I was just not really prepared to do that at this point. Okay, so on the edges of the station, we're not really going to do any detailing. We're just going to put some kind of buildings, and that's going to be it, okay? But don't worry, I'm not really going to forget about it. For the next Altengrad episode, we are going to do some more industry here. Now, what am I doing in here? What kind of abomination I'm putting together with procedural objects? This is supposed to be the coal crane on rails. I was really trying to do this in a different way than before, because I just didn't find any real life references at first, and then I was given on the stream some real life pictures, even from like 30s, 40s, even later years. How were they putting coals into the locomotives or into the tenders, for example, in this case? I definitely found a lot of pictures and saw a lot of pictures from the American stations or British railway stations, and they were all looking rather similar and very big. They usually had these like big chutes or something, like big buildings, coal storage above the rails, where tenders would just be moved under them, and just the coal would just drop into it very, very quickly. But I really wanted to do something small scale, and something that's going to just suit this kind of European setting a bit more, Central European setting. So eventually, I saw some real life references where they had very, very similar carts, let's call them, with cranes, with actually steam cranes, with like little chimneys on top of them, because obviously the cranes need to be powered somehow, not just manually, of course. And I found something similar. Basically, these kinds of small carts with like a cabin for the crane operator and this, bulk cargo crane hand or however you want to call it, right? So I wanted to recreate that in City Skylines. It's looking a bit lame, I suppose, because I eventually made it using the airport bags card and is it vanilla? No, it's probably not vanilla. Basically, the old looking docks crane, right? I was just using that procedural object version of it, just cut away all the legs of it, all the rails, from the bottom of it. Only keep the cabin with the arm. And eventually it turned out looking fine, I was kind of aiming for something without like a closed cabin, but this is absolutely fine. It was only made using 3 different objects, so I'm perfectly fine with it. Hopefully you guys are fine with it too. Anyway, these are the finished cinematics, looking at the finished thing. So the train station got really, really big. But looking at the cinematics, I'm actually not all that satisfied with the lengths of the platforms, because these lengths are just the standard lengths really for the buildings of the stations that are there. But in next episode, I am going to do some kind of improvements for the station itself, for the passenger part of the station, because it's kind of small. Now, yeah, sure, we have the entrance building, which is kind of big. And then we have just, some sickly looking small 2 platforms, like 2.5 platforms there. That's not exactly like a huge capacity. That's not exactly like a big main train station of like a capital city in Central Europe, right? But that's kind of intentional. Like I said before, I would really like to do some expansion of this station as we go, further in time, because, these kinds of stations were always growing. In the next episode, I am going to show you one more tram ride, because I really wanted to just show you some different parts of the city as well. Okay, so stay tuned for the ride. Anyway, thanks for watching today's episode. If you liked it, then you can do the usual stuff. Thumbs up below the video, comment, subscribe if you are new here, and you can also become a channel member if you want to directly support the channel, directly support what I do, the cities that I build. You can become the channel member with the link in the video description or the join button below. Thanks to all the channel members that we currently have. I really do appreciate your support, guys. All right. Thanks again for watching. Take care and goodbye.